friends of Poundfish Chess, this is International Master Camelia Ciobanu, and in this tutorial I want to show you how to checkmate with the knight and the bishop in our endgame series. And we start from this position in which white has already limited the king to the last rank, and the king is stubbornly trying to remain around the dark squared corner because white is having the light squared bishop. So what is to be done is trying to bring the king on the corner of the same color of white's bishop. So how are we going to do this? And I will show you the technique. Well, first of all, we need to bring the knight on the 7th rank to take control of the corner so the king cannot go there anymore, and then he will be forced to go to f8 in this case, and we will push the king toward the light corner. So how do we do this? Now we take away his retreating square from g8. Okay, so now the king is forced to move on to e8. Good, now we have to make a team with our bishop and knight and king. And all the while we'll have to pay attention at the escaping squares that black is looking after. So now he would like to escape through d7. So now the knight will go to e5 to take control of that square. And remember that white's movements with the knight will always be, in this case, from the 5th rank to the 7th, and then back to the 5th, and then back to the 7th, back to the 5th, and back to the 7th. And in the end, it will be able to checkmate on the 6th rank. We'll see how. Good. So for now, we will remember this W with the knight. So knight to e5, taking control of d7. We'll see first what happens if the king goes back to f8. Okay, in this case, the knight will check the king, and you can already see and notice the same pattern. Now the king is attacking the knight, and white's king has to take the opposition, because after playing king to d8, black will try to escape on a dark square. So it will be our king to take the opposition again, so that the king cannot escape through the dark squares. So let's say that he will try to go back, and now it's time for the bishop to do his job by putting the king in check and forcing him back to d8. Now white could simply make a waiting move until the king goes to c8, and now again he wants to escape through b7. So who's going to take care of that square? The knight. Okay, so knight to c5 controlling b7. When the king goes back, now we can force him on c8 with a check. Remember, again, 7th rank with the knight. Okay, king c8. Now it's time to defend the knight with the king and take the opposition, because black's king cannot go back to d8. King goes to b8. Remember, he wants to go to a7. So again, we will take the opposition with the king. And now when he's trying to go through d7, to go toward the center, again the bishop will check on the light diagonal. King goes back to b8, and now remember the knight should not go back to a5, because then when it will check on c6, it will simply block the long diagonal, but will go back to c5. Okay, so now the king is forced to go in the corner. Now pay much attention not to put the king into a stalemate by bringing the knight to a6. Okay, so again, we need to make a waiting move until the king goes back to b8. And can you see checkmate in 2 right now? Knight to a6, king to a8, and bishop to c6. And this is a checkmate in 17 moves from the starting position. Okay, we still need to see another option that black had at some point, which is after knight to e5. This is a critical moment. We saw what is the technique of forcing the checkmate once the king goes back to f8, hoping to go back to the black corner. But what if the black goes to d8, because in this way he wants to escape in the center, Okay, in this case, we have another variation, which is very similar to the first one. King to e6, and I have to mention that there are more possibilities to bring the king into a checkmate position. I will only show you one, which is very easy to remember, because every time there is the possibility to get into a line that we have already discussed. For example, now if the king goes to e8, we get into the same position as we have previously seen. But let's say he wants to escape to c7. Well, in this case, first of all, we will take the b6 square by bringing the knight to d7, and the king will come toward the center, wanting to escape through b5. So every time we look at the escaping squares, as I have already said. So since it is a light square, the white bishop will take care of it. Okay, so can you see that basically now the king cannot go on any of these squares? And now the king will go back to c7, and so we can take the opposition with the king on e7, taking away the d8 square. When the king comes back toward the center, the bishop will take away that exit. And since the king goes back, now white can still play bishop to d5, taking away b7 and b6 and c6 and even b8. Okay, so now the king can only go to c8, and finally the king goes back, and we get into the same position as we have seen in the first line. Okay, so now the knight comes to c5, but if the king does not want to go to d8 and he goes to b8 instead, now our king comes to c6. We know already what happens if the king goes to c8. Knight comes to b7. And if the king goes to a7 instead, now white can take their position again, and black will only have these two squares available for the king. Okay, so now the king can move up, king b8, and we get into the same position as we have seen already. So again, don't go for the stalemate. Waiting move first, king to b8, knight a6 check, king in the corner finally, and checkmate with the bishop. So remember, in order to checkmate the king in a bishop and knight endgame, the first thing to do is limit the king on one of the sides of the board, and then force the king into the corner of the same color with the bishop, and then just use the technique in order to make all the pieces cooperate and create a mating net for the opponent's king. Thank you so much for your attention, and I will talk to you in our next video.